what type of diabetes?
Type 1.
Type 1. Okay, and then...
So for people who don't know, can you clarify the difference between type 1 and type 2?
Type 2, you don't have to take insulin usually. Usually you're on pills that stabilize your blood sugar. And you just have to monitor what you eat, monitor your sugar levels and stuff like that. And usually with type 2, you eat, it brings your blood sugar down.
Right.
Instead of coming up as if you're type 1 diabetic like me. You eat, raises your carbohydrates, turn into sugars. And then it raises your blood sugar. You don't. Juvenile diabetes just means that you were diagnosed before you were 18, which is I was also, and I was diagnosed when I was 15 years old. And I've been type 1 diabetic. But if you type 2 diabetes and you don't take care of it, it can develop into type 1.
Okay.
And then you cannot get rid of type 1 diabetes.
Now the one thing I'd like to interject into that is thinking back to my aunt when she had diabetes and she was on insulin, and which is where I first recognized that your psychology can control your physiology. Knowing that, with that in mind, you believe that it is possible that at some point you could be off of the insulin because...
Oh, absolutely.
I love the way that when you were just talking a moment ago, you know, as you were describing all of the different health related issues that you had going on, you said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." So that alone right there, you believe that you're gonna overcome all of this, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
And you believe that you're gonna overcome all of this because you've already been pronounced dead once or more than once.
Once.
Once, and then can you remind me what that was like? You were just talking about it, and I really want to introduce this to the public.
Yeah. All I remember is, I'll take you from the beginning. I hadn't been doing my medicine right for a while, and well, I'll never do that again. But at the time, I had been not using my medicine right. Everything was going wrong. I was eating without taking insulin, and I wasn't even taking my potassium or magnesium for my other health problems. And I just remember getting worse and worse, and I was feeling worse. It felt like my veins were burning towards the last. It felt like all the veins in my body were burning. It felt like my stomach had just acids in it, and it just felt like a burning sensation all over my body. My eyes began to get a burning feeling, and it's because of all the acid, and that's why I went into DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, because the acid in my body took over, and all those acids and the blood sugar was high. That's how you create them. You get ketones.
Ketones, right?
You get ketones, and ketones are basically keto acid. And it was getting worse and worse and burning more. My whole body was burning, and I was drinking so much water it wasn't even like funny. It was just like.
So you were feeling extremely dehydrated at that moment.
The last 2 days is. Before I went in is what I remember. I remember being in my kitchen, and I went in there and I filled up this humongous jug. It must have been 1.5 gallons full of water, and I was drinking on it, and I just felt like I just needed it. And obviously my body was wanting it to flush out all this acid in my body, and I couldn't drink enough. And I drank the entire 1.5 gallons of water in like
So
an
you
hour.
hadn't done anything to alkalize at this point?
No, not at
Okay.
all. And I remember taking that jug, filling it back up, and sitting on my couch in the living room. And I was home alone. My mom wasn't there. None of my friends would answer my phone calls. And I was trying to get a hold of somebody, but I didn't want to call 911 because at the time I told you I was in a dark place and wasn't doing good. And I just sat there on the couch, and I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. And the first thing I could not get to the sink fast enough to fill up that gallon pitcher thing. And I took that. I remember taking that drink, and then I remember waking up on the kitchen floor. And I remember walking to my bedroom, and I don't remember anything until I woke up. And remember is tunnels, just black, wet, brownish, muddy, murky tunnels.
So now what you're remembering now, what you're describing now, for the public, this was when they had told you that you were in a coma.
Yeah, well, they hadn't told me, but I was in a coma.
Right.
And I'll get to that in a second, but I was just walking down these caverns in a wet, murky tunnel, and it had that smell like a wet, moldy cave, like that rich,
rancid,
kind of a sulfury smell.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like that moldy, sulfury, it's kind of a salty smell, but it was like mold and salt put together basically. And I remember that smell, and everything was wet, and I could physically feel that it was wet. And I'd get to the end of the tunnel, and there'd be two more muddy, murky tunnels like that. And I'd walk down those tunnels if I chose left or right, and every time I get to the end, there'd be even more.
Were you tired?
Every time.
Do you remember feeling tired or just?
Not at all. I just remember this endless walking. Like it was there. Like it wasn't like a dream. It was like I was actually there. I had no physical or remembrance.
Did you have any emotion, like fear, loneliness, bored, or curiosity, or you were just walking?
It was like I desperately wanted to get out of here, but I couldn't get out.
Okay.
It was like I didn't know how I got there, and I didn't think this was a dream. I actually thought this was real.
Right. So you were confused, and you were really trying to figure out if I pick
like,
right or left, one of these tunnels is going to be the right way.
Right, and every time I get to the end, and I just was heartbroken because there's even more every time.
So what I'm hearing is every time you would get to the end, like let's say you were down one tunnel, then it would turn into 2, and then 3 or
like
4 or 10 or however many. Each time it was more tunnels to choose from.
Well, not each time was more, but it was like it was never less, ever.
Okay.
It never got smaller. It was always either the same amount
or more. Okay.
Every time, and I just remember just feeling like, when am I ever going to get out of here? And finally, I just opened my eyes, and they.
And you found yourself.
And I found myself with 27 tubes inside of me, and my wrists and arms bound to the.
Now you were pronounced dead for how long?
A little over 2 minutes.
A little over 2 minutes. And during that time, in other words, there was no break in your cognitive senses. In other words,
I flatlined.
You flatlined, but in your mind.
Oh, in my mind,
there's no disconnect. There's no time where you just don't remember anything.
No, like you're saying, like I was in the tunnels and then like black or whatever, like nothing, and then back onto the tunnels. It wasn't like that for me.
So like this was a continual. That's a better way to ask. This was a continual feeling, or when I say feeling, this was a continual reality for you.
Yeah.
It went from everything that you described that preceded the coma, and then when you went into the coma and then went through the flat line.
The thing is, I didn't know how I got into there, like these tunnels.
Right.
I just was like,
you just were there.
All of a sudden, I was just there.
So it was almost as if you remember the last thing you really remember before you got to the tunnels was just the getting ready and the water and the whatever, and then it went straight from that to wow, how did I end up here?
Yeah, exactly.
This doesn't make sense to me.
It didn't make sense at all, and that's why I was just so confused and wanted to get out of there, because I did not feel like a dream at all.
When you flatline, your cognitive process, your experience of still walking through those you've been pronounced dead.
It was like still there.
So now, for those who believe that when you pass away, that's all there is nothing else, what would you tell them?
No, I mean, because I was still in there. I was still walking through there, and I was still going in my mind. I never, not once, had a
loss
blank,
of life.
Had a loss.
Like in your cognitive senses, you had no loss of life.
Yeah, I didn't die in my mind,
right.
But I know I died because my family was. My dad was crying his eyes. I'll be honest, I had given my life to God whenever I was about 12 or 13.
Amen. Do you remember what it was like when you gave your life to God?
Yeah, I remember exactly. Like
Give me that experience.
My father was like telling me, he's like, at the age of 12 or 13, see, you're good. You're watched over as a child, and you're not gonna go to hell if you die and you're a little child.
Right.
Because you have God's watching over you. You have His blessing until you're about 12 or 13.
My question is, before this happened, before you had gone into those tunnels, so to speak, before you had your coma, is that a time where you had strayed off the path? Like during that period, would you consider yourself having strayed off the path?
I would. I really would.
I
wouldn't just helling there. I wasn't going to church regularly. I hadn't been in.
You didn't have
I didn't have a steady
relationship with God.
Relationship with God at all. Didn't.
Do you now?
It was a very big awakening after I got told what had happened. Whenever I was in there.
So now you would say that you have a stronger relationship with your father, with God?
Definitely. My father, he actually has a fishing ministry. It's called the CFA, and he goes out and fishes with everyone, and every day, and everyone is welcome to come. Everyone's welcome to come, but all the people that go out there to fish, he says a little prayer with them in the morning, and they have like a little service, and they all go fishing for the day, and then afterwards they all have a prayer and they thank God for their catch and everything.
Taylor, would you say that God walks beside you every day? Would you say that you have a strong enough relationship that you have a conversation with Him every day?
You mean like do I talk to Him every day?
Pray. Yeah, like pray
I pray.
Okay. So, what do you think if you had to share a piece of advice with the world? What would that be? The most valuable piece of information that you could give to the world right now would be what?
Give your life to God. Probably. Yeah.